Although Xunzi emphasizes an externally imposed system, he is primarily concerned with the education or self-education of those with a vocation to rule. All depends on it. Quote, "The law cannot stand alone. The various categories of Li cannot implement themselves. It's only when one obtains the right man that they can be actualized. Without the right man, they are lost. The law is the principle of good order. The nobleman is the source of the law. Thus, if one has a nobleman, even if the law is rudimentary, its effects will be widespread. If one does not have a nobleman, even if the law is full and detailed, it will lose its proper order and will not respond properly to changes in circumstances." End quote. So, Xunzi remains overwhelmingly concerned with the cultivation of noblemen. When the sages and the noblemen determine that civilized society can exist only if the desires of men are controlled, they begin with themselves. They set out from a general social-political philosophy. This philosophy explains the source of misery in the human world. They understand that the task must begin with the effort to bring their own natures under control. Noblemen are thus motivated by the burning desire to acquire a knowledge of the cultural heritage. This would make the self-mastery possible. Quote, "Wood is straightened by aligning with a rope and bent into a wheel by aligning it with the compass. And the metal sword is sharpened with the whetstone. The nobleman acquires broad learning and tests himself daily. He will then become enlightened and commit no transgressions." End quote. What Xunzi stresses here about learning is the cultural heritage embodied in the Book of Documents, Book of Songs, the study of Li, and the Spring and Autumn Annals. Xunzi's conception of learning is close to that of the Analects. It does not only involve fact-gathering, but also involves the task of mastering the anarchic forces of one's own nature. By exposing oneself to the true wisdom embodied in the cultural heritage, one can acquire the power of self-mastery. We might say, although Confucius insists on the unity underlying all learning, he would have agreed with Xunzi that cumulative, concrete learning is to be emphasized. Confucius would not have accepted Mencius's notion of intuitive knowledge. Knowledge must be acquired from without. Quote, "If one does not climb the mountain, one cannot know how high the heavens are. And if one does not gaze into the deep ravines, one cannot know the thickness of the earth. If one does not listen to the words handed down by the sage, one does not understand the greatness of learning." End quote. The individual who is determined to learn has a steep path to climb. He does not simply rely on book learning. Xunzi is concerned about a true teacher. The teacher is able to manage to embody Li and righteousness within his own person. He should be a stern master who is able to convey directly to his disciple the spiritual self-assurance which he has managed to attain. He does not simply communicate learning. He communicates his own being as an exemplar of the results of true learning. With the steadfast devotion to learning and the proper guidance of a true teacher, the man of true intelligence can mold himself to virtue and to the firm control of his own nature. Quote, piled up earth becomes a mountain, and winds and rain arise therefrom. Accumulated habits of goodness turn into virtue, and numinous enlightenment is attained. The sage-like mind can then extend its influence over 1,000 miles. End quote. Xunzi has a genuine optimistic faith that the internalization of the moral, cultural heritage may in the end lead some to the attainment of virtue. In Mencius, heaven provides us with innate propensities toward the good. In Xunzi, heaven provides us with the heavenly mind, which possesses the intellectual capacity to understand the human condition. This understanding could make it possible for a few to actualize their powers of reason and to apply these powers both to the task of their own self-transformation and to the further transformation of society. Without such a vanguard who is able to actualize the spirit of Li, the transformative power of Li will never make itself effective in the society as a whole. The crucial question which Xunzi addresses to Mencius is this: if the nature is truly good, quote, why does one require sage kings? And why does one require Li and righteousness? End quote. It is precisely because the nature is evil that the power of rulers was established above to oversee them, and Li and righteousness made manifest in order to transform them. However, as we have seen, Mencius has an answer to this. It is because of inertness of the potentiality for goodness in most human beings that we need sages and noblemen for help with development of potential goodness. Xunzi believes that the man in the street can become Yu. He states that all men have the capacity to realize humanity and goodness as long as they exert themselves to learn. If they concentrate their entire will on thought and study and unceasingly accumulate habits of goodness, they could actualize their capacities. Quote, they can do it, but they cannot be made to do it. End quote. Let us now examine how the problem of the failure of will arises in Mencius and Xunzi. In Mencius, we have a natural dynamic tendency to growth no matter how weak the will is and how easily blocked off. In Xunzi, we have mere intellectual capacity. There is nothing plant-like or organic in Xunzi's latent intellectual capacity. Xunzi's concept of intellectual capacity seems to be closer to that in the moist logic. In moist logic, the word knowledge, 知, is defined as capacity, 才. The word 才 derives from a word meaning timber, 才. It suggests a kind of inert raw material. In the moists, it is by an actual decision to think or reflect that one actualizes one's capacity. The decision to reflect is understood in the moist canon as seeking with intelligence. There is no suggestion of any innate dynamic which inertially leads one to reflect. In Mencius, a man of good will, who is resolutely determined to act rightly, is born along with his heart of goodness and his well-nourished qi. The task of self-cultivation seems to be much easier. Even those who are not learned intellectuals may achieve righteousness within the narrow confines of their existence. In Xunzi, the sages realize that all men can escape from a nasty and brutish existence only by devising the system of li and laws. They create those rules in order to assure all humans peace, security, and reasonable satisfaction of their creaturely needs and desires. In fact, both Confucius and Mencius are also deeply concerned with the peace and welfare of society as a whole. They both regarded noblemen as an instrument for achieving these desirable goals. They think that these goals depend on the pure motives of the ethical vanguard rather than the system of li and laws. Xunzi is not only concerned with the general welfare of society, but also with the goals of the state, wealth, and power. These are the overwhelming preoccupation of the rulers of his time. Unlike Mencius, the achievement of relative order by the use of methods against Confucian ideals seems to Xunzi desirable within the desperate circumstances of his times. Xunzi will not turn aside questions about the power and wealth of states, even though he always adds a Confucian dimension to his answers. The sages may have set out from a self-regarding impulse to escape from wretchedness, but through their enormous intellectual exertions and insights, they achieved complete success in internalizing within themselves the spirit of li and righteousness. Thus, their own personal motivation in the end becomes basically moral and spiritual. Moreover, there is a deep inner devotion to holy rite and music in Xunzi. This seems to carry Xunzi well beyond his appreciation of their social function. In the face of moist and legalist attacks on rights and music, Xunzi maintains that, quote, the Li, which is serving life, adorn our joys, and in departing from the dead, adorn our sorrows, end quote. The Li elevates and humanizes all the experiences of life. Of course, the Li also serves to maintain and reinforce all distinctions among the social roles, ranks, and statuses of the social order. It works to assign all of them their proper functions and forms. So, it serves to assure the peace and harmony of society. All the distinctions of Li help to articulate the good social order. However, they are just instruments in the whole social mechanism. Each actor in this social mechanism may come to enjoy his participation in the society as a whole. In Xunzi, we find the explicit statement that the significance of the sacrificial rites for the nobleman is that it is the way of man. But for the common people, it involves the service of the spirits. This does not mean that the nobleman regards the sacrifice as instrumental to the preservation of social order, but rather, he regards the numinous and sacred element of the rite as lying within the rite itself. In both the case of noblemen and the common people, the sacrifices have an aesthetic, ethical, and spiritual effect. In the case of the common people, the rites perfect their customs, 成俗. The cosmic dimension of Li seems to reinforce the view that Li is much more than a socially functional device. This dimension of Li helps us to understand the statement that, quote, man makes culture, unquote. It does not mean that culture is an arbitrary, conventional invention. In Chinese, the word wei seems to have the sense of man-made or artificial in a pejorative sense. In fact, Xunzi links the Li to the larger cosmic patterns. Quote, the heaven and earth are harmonized by it, the Li. The sun and the moon are illumined by it. The 4 seasons derive their order from it. The stars and the planets move by it. The rivers and streams flow through it. The 10,000 things flourish by it. Good and evil are controlled by it. And joy and anger find their proper expressions through it. End quote. Here, the Li is elevated to the status of principle of order, governing both the cosmos and the human order. The idea of convention and contrivance suggests that what has been made might have easily been made in some other fashion. To Xunzi, the good order of society, which he describes, is the universal order of civilization. When Xunzi speaks of the sages as making it or forming it, he means that what they actually do is to make manifest the overall pattern appropriate to the end of harmonizing the centrifugal tendencies found in the individual human organism. It may not be innate in the individual, but it seems to be latently present in the objective cosmic order. The Li, in essence, is a kind of natural law. Like natural law, it is not self-enacting. What the ancient sages did in bringing the order of society into existence was not invent an arbitrary system of Li, but discover it by a process of reflection.